8,500 U.S. troops are on high alert in Eastern Europe as President Joe Biden has called a potential Russian invasion of Ukraine imminent. Russian President Vladimir Putin has escalated troop action, but Ukraine's leaders are urging calm right now. Biden today says the geopolitical stakes of a Russian invasion couldn't be higher.
There will be enormous consequences if he were to go in and invade, as he could, the entire country. Enormous consequences worldwide. This would be the largest, if he were to move in with all those forces, would be the largest invasion since World War II. It would change the world.
And joining us now with more are Julian Hayda, a Ukrainian-American journalist who now has residency in Ukraine. Hayda previously was a producer for Worldview on WBEZ and is scheduled to return to Ukraine on Saturday. Ian Kelly, the ambassador in residence at Northwestern University. Kelly was United States ambassador to Georgia from 2015 to 2018. Prior to that, he was the U.S. ambassador to the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. And John Hugo, a Ukrainian-American lawyer who helped assist the Ukrainian parliament draft its first post-Soviet constitution. We welcome all of you here to Chicago tonight. Ambassador Kelly, what would those consequences be should Russia invade Ukraine?
Well, it's interesting because today the White House, a couple of senior officials outlined what these painful consequences would be, and they would, I think, affect the energy sector, which of course is their biggest source of income, but also exports of high-tech technology, which Russia and many other countries, of course, depend on our Silicon Valley technology. But I think that the real impact is going to be the impact on markets in Russia. The stock market yesterday lost in Russia, in Moscow, lost 7% of its value just from the threat of sanctions like these.
77%, that's a giant chunk of its
no,
value.
7%.
Oh, 7%. I thought you said
day.
77%. Okay, 7% still not great. John Hugo, knowing the region as you do you believe that an invasion is imminent, or could this be a bluff?
I think when we look at the situation, we need to sort of step back and sort of what is the big picture here? And people talk a lot about NATO expansion and Putin feeling encircled, et cetera. But I think if we really step back, the key issue here is Putin wants to, in my view, destroy Ukraine as an independent sovereign state. And he needs to do this for two reasons. One is the historical. If you read the article that he published last July, where he sort of makes the erroneous, in my view, historical case for Ukraine not being a people, not being a country, there's no historical basis on which Ukraine should be an independent country. You realize that for him, it's about recreating the Soviet Union, recreating the Soviet Russian Empire, and taking back Ukraine, which he views as part and parcel of Russia. And the second reason is that an independent, vibrant Ukraine is a huge danger to his own power and to what's happening in Russia. If you look at Ukraine over the last 30 years, I think all of us that follow it closely are disappointed that perhaps on corruption and other issues it hasn't moved as quickly as we would have hoped. But Ukraine is a democracy. It has a free press. It has a very strong civil society. Minority rights are respected. They've had 6 different people be president over the last 30 years. And so for Putin, this is about destroying Ukraine as an independent country, or at least in the worst case, turning it into a vassal state. And it's based on a historical premise that's erroneous in my view, and on the fact that he can't afford to have an independent, vibrant Ukraine.
And Ukraine leadership that has talked about its desire to join NATO and to have sympathy for Western nations. Julian Hayden, President Biden has talked about more sanctions, sending arms and supplies to Ukraine. Is there anything diplomatically that can be done to deter military invasion at this point?
I think that time will tell, which is not an answer that 45 million Ukrainians want to hear. This is a war that they have been living through over the last 8 years. Granted, it's been a frozen conflict, but a conflict no less. And sanctions have had mixed success. So, what I think the people of Ukraine most want is peace. They want what anybody wants, and the way you get to that is, as you can imagine, a source of great argument. Now, many Ukrainians are very happy with the fact that the U.S. has supported Ukraine, especially since Ukraine made the rather bold move to turn away from Russia after a popular uprising in 2013 and 2014. Now they're looking around at the countries that promised them support. Ukraine gave up one of the largest nuclear arsenals in the world in exchange for specifically American, but also Russian defense. And now they're looking around and feeling kind of lonely in the world. So they're grateful for American support, but the way that peace will be reached is, I think, a really big question. But it's a question that is mostly front of mind for I think most of the Ukrainian population. Whether or not there'll be an invasion or not, that is something that there's a lot of discussion over in Ukraine. But
Ukrainian leaders have urged calm, saying that the population shouldn't get all fortified for some kind of invasion right now. Ambassador Kelly, what appetite is there among NATO countries, including the U.S., for some kind of military conflict to assist Ukraine and Russia, noting that there are countries like Germany that have stayed relatively neutral to this point?
Yeah, I wouldn't say Germany's neutral, but I think that we're not really encouraged by their extreme reluctance to sign on to some of the more painful economic sanctions. I think that it's really kind of a matter of degrees in terms of Europe, what kinds of sanctions they want. And I think that there's also a difference between those who think that a strong response will deter Putin, and those who think that that a strong response is escalatory and can make the situation even more tense. I think the United States and the United Kingdom and some of the Eastern European countries believe that half measures or a weak response it actually encourages more aggression. But I think that there are a number of people in Central Europe, particularly in Germany and France, who really kind of see it the opposite way, and are looking to not do measures that they see as escalatory and we see as deterrents.
So certainly a high-level chess match here. What about John Hugo, the stakes back in the U.S.? We know that Russia's been very active in cyber and hacking operations, the 2016 election. What could the consequences be on those fronts?
Well, again, I think going back to the issue of whether Putin is going to invade or not, I'd just like to make a quick point that I think there's a binary decision for him to make. There's an off-ramp, a diplomatic off-ramp, or if in fact the goal here is really to destabilize and turn Ukraine into a vassal state, if he's going to do an incursion, it can't be a minor incursion, because it's going to incur the full wrath of Western sanctions with very, very little gain. He could try to take back a portion of the Donetsk and Luhansk Oblast, but that's not going to get him enough. So if he does make a move, it's got to be big enough to really make a difference in terms of destabilizing Ukraine and getting him to his ultimate goal. Obviously, that's going to have repercussions for him, but it'll, obviously he has weapons that he can use against us in terms of cyber attacks, getting involved in our elections, et cetera. And that's something obviously that we need to prepare for. And I'm sure that the administration is looking at how are we going to counter his countermeasures to Western sanctions.
And Julian Hayda, you talked about how the population in Ukraine feels right now. How prepared are they for a military invasion, and how well can they withstand an extended military operation?
Well, I think if military analysts have said that Russia would need very many more soldiers than it currently has on Ukraine's border to occupy the country. I don't think that would be the case, but that also, as John mentioned, might not be the goal. The goal might very well just be to destabilize Ukraine to the point that Ukraine can become more submissive to Russia and kind of be absorbed back into that Soviet space that Vladimir Putin wants to recreate. So it's very difficult to say right now, but there are now citizen rifle training happening. There are people who are preparing to fight because it is their livelihoods, and it's what people want, and they want peace first and foremost, but they want what anybody here in Chicago wants, which is to have a warm house, to have food on the table, and with all the diplomatic talks that are going on,
but
that's important to
certainly,
keep in mind.
certainly escalation happening all over the place here, and we'll have to leave it there for now. Our thanks to Julian Hayda, Ian Kelly, and John Hugo. Thank you so much.